All right, hello and welcome to our keynote session for today from 11 to 12:30. Just a few housekeeping announcements. We do have live closed captioning available during this presentation, and you can toggle this on and off using the attendee controls at the bottom of your screen. The session is being recorded, and we can provide a recording of this on the conference website following the conference. Please enter your questions into the Q&A, and we will get to those at the end of the session, when we also encourage you to engage with us and other attendees through using the chat function at the bottom of your screen. If you have any technical issues, go ahead and put those in the chat, and I'll try to monitor those throughout the time here. And again, I want to welcome you. My name is Tracy Stout. I'm head of research and instructional services at Missouri State University Libraries. And today we have Bob Butterfield as our keynote. He has been the Director of Instructional Resources for the University of Wisconsin-Stout since 2011. As director, he leads the university-operated textbook rental program, the Campus Digital Resources Program, and the Open Educational Resources Program. Bob has a long history of working with textbooks and textbook affordability, and is experienced in the workings of inclusive access, open educational resources, textbook rental, and other textbook affordability approaches. He is a vocal advocate for student textbook affordability in any form. Bob has had the honor of working with the Open Educational Network Steering Committee, as well as the National Association of College Stores Government Relations Committee, as well as many other national and state efforts. He is a founding member of the Affordability Summit, an annual affordability event held at UW-Stout, and the current chair of the Community for Open Wisconsin. Wow, Bob, that's great. Well, thank you for joining us, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. I'll share my screen here. Well, I am absolutely honored to be with you this morning and to be able to provide the keynote address for the Missouri Affordability and OER Symposium. Like Tracy said, my name is Bob Butterfield, the Director of Instructional Resources at the University of Wisconsin-Stout. This year's symposium is so aptly named, Show Me the Path to A and OER. The symposium's website indicates that indicates the desire for participants to explore the variety of ways or paths that the educational community can take towards access and awareness of the affordability and OER endeavor. It's so great because it just so happens that exploring those paths has been exactly the adventure that I've been on for the last 11 years. Fortune has allowed me to be part of a comprehensive textbook program whose sole purpose is to advocate for student textbook affordability and to follow whatever path that allows us to provide quality curricular content while saving students thousands of dollars. And along the way, we've been able to increase access and promote academic freedom. Change slides here. Just had to get a picture of this theater in there. I'm a community theater director, and we're opening this week, so I wanted to share where I've been staying at most of this week. So during the course of this conversation, I want to tell you a little bit about what our program looks like at Stout. This is going to be a high-level look, and it's not my intention to sell you on our way of doing things. The idea is to look at several of the tools that we've used and with varying degrees of success. This isn't a complete list, it's only an illustration, but it is a picture of paths and pitfalls that can lead to student textbook affordability. Knowing the available paths and terrain are essential elements in creating a map to your destination. Without understanding them, you can certainly get lost. So please journey with me down some of these paths. Some may be familiar and some may challenge what you believe to be a correct path. But regardless of the paths we choose, we're all heading in the same direction. So let's explore and learn together. So who is Bob Butterfield? I followed the usual path to working in affordability. You know, my educational background is in criminal justice. I spent 15 years in military service as an investigator in public affairs. I can't tell you that a criminal investigation background hasn't been useful in working with textbooks, but there it is. I also have 20 years experience in retail management. And for the last 14 years, I've been working specifically in higher ed. I love to fish, work with wood, participate in community theater, and of course, read and collect books. All this has been mixed together to create a position that I now call an affordability practitioner. I work at UW-Stout, and Stout is located in Menominee, Wisconsin, west central Wisconsin, about an hour east of Minneapolis, St. Paul. It says 2 hours on my slide, but I lied. Stout is unique in many ways. It's Wisconsin's only four-year polytechnic. We are a National Baldrige Medal winner. We're a laptop campus where all of our undergraduate students are issued a laptop upon entry into the school. And we have a unique student-funded, campus-operated textbook affordability program whose sole mission is to advocate for student textbook affordability. Our program provides the vast majority of curricular content for our students, both undergraduate and graduate. This is a student program. My office is tasked to set fees, and they can only be high enough to cover the cost of providing course materials and the services we provide. We cannot make a profit, and we only recommend those fees. In order to increase them, we have to have approval from our student senate. I personally love this part the best. It forces us to be transparent and accountable for how we spend the students' money. We are answerable to our investors. And last fall, I attended a meeting of the full Senate, and I was grilled for over an hour on textbooks, OER, in our program. I love that give and take, and I love how they take interest in what we do. And this oversight forces us to be innovative, to be frugal, and to aggressively pursue any means that helps us keep costs low. So what do our students get in return? They get the large majority of the content that's assigned to their courses. Doesn't matter if it's print, digital, or access codes. We don't set any price minimums or maximums on what's included. We don't work with a single publisher. We work with whoever the faculty chooses to adopt. We don't restrict students to a single format. If print is assigned to their course and they prefer digital, they come to our office and we make sure and take care of them. And we always fight to keep prices as low as possible. They pay one fee, whether they have one book or 10 books assigned in a course. They know what those fees are far in advance of the beginning of the fall term. The fees are set for an entire year and they do not change once the academic year starts, once actually the fiscal year starts. Plus, they have access to services and other resources, many of them that are listed on this slide, all included for that fee that they pay us. I would argue that we are one of the first and actually a true all-inclusive program. So what does this cost? Our undergraduate students pay about $315 per year, and graduate students pay about $215, depending on how many credits they take, so per credit fee. And this accounts for about 98% of the course materials that are assigned at Stout. As I mentioned earlier, it includes e-texts, print books, access codes, some lab books, workbooks, some lab kits, some digital products that would not be considered usually a standard textbook, and many other things. But here's the question, is this a good deal? It depends. I'd like to take just a few minutes and ponder a few questions that help us put into perspective the return on our students' investment and how we gauge affordability. First, what is a textbook? Simply, according to the Oxford Dictionary, a textbook is a book used as a standard work for the study of a particular subject. This falls quite a bit short when we consider that today curricular content is so far-reaching beyond a standard work that it can include ebooks, homework platforms, lab manuals, and a whole host of other materials that can be essential parts of a course. Maybe a more fitting term for the purposes of textbook affordability may be describing it as curricular content. But despite what we call it, the important takeaway for this question is, what are all of the components that contribute to high textbook costs? At Stout, we define textbooks very, very loosely and try to include anything that would normally be considered a standard textbook, or things that may require a tech fee of some sort with access codes or anything like that, and interpret this as loosely as we possibly can. This really helps us to gauge the true impact for our students. And students often don't even realize that some assigned materials, like access codes, for instance, would even be considered textbooks. So a clearer understanding of that full array of curricular content allows a better understanding of the obstacles and strategies that are needed for us to support our affordability effort. So if we expand the definition of a textbook, how do we determine what a textbook costs? I'd like to share with you this short video on the student perspective. It's thankful to the folks at the University of North Carolina Greenville Library.
Hey, Bob, we can't hear the video, but we can see the captions.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Not sure what that was. Anyway, you saw by the captions a lot of what the students were saying there. They're saying that textbooks are expensive, that there's a big variation in what it's costing them, and they're finding many different ways to get around actually purchasing textbooks because of the cost. And it goes on to say later on that, you know, we've not taken classes because we don't have access to textbooks, or things like access codes have went ahead and they've priced us out of our ability to participate in certain courses. And I'm sure that you've heard some of these same points made by your students. I know I have. And frankly, that cost of a textbook is really going to depend on who you ask. It depends on the type of content. It depends on factors like, is the book new or used? Is it digital or print? Is it required or recommended? There have been several attempts to determine average costs of textbooks. The Student Watch Report, authored by the National Association of College Stores, or NACS, indicates that the average is around $53 a book. Then we have research by John Hilton and some other OER scholars who argue that the cost per book is more like $100, which is right. Well, both of them are, and neither. Is it more important to be correct on an average cost, or to be sure of the impact regardless of the number? If your students can't buy food, $53 per book is just as unobtainable as $100 per book. Both of these national averages have value. Both have been studied and are based on the collected data. Both have value for me when engaging my stakeholders. Using the $100 book figure allows me to clearly demonstrate the impact of textbook economy on our students to both administration and outside stakeholders. But when we're gauging the value of our program, we hold ourselves accountable to the lower average, which allows us a much better metric for determining the impact of our program. And just to totally confuse you, we have a third set of numbers that we look at, and these are campus actual numbers. Our business decisions are based, of course, on actual evaluations of the average cost. We do all of the textbook acquisitions here at Stout, so we know what we're paying. We also keep close eye on the average number of resources assigned per course, and then we weigh those figures against what the students pay in their textbook fee. These numbers can be quite elusive. At your campus, they may even be proprietary and you may not have access to them, or they may not be tracked at all. Textbook affordability may be a national problem, but it's a local crisis, and we'll come back to that later on. Affordability efforts need to be based on local data and demographics, so your strategies can be focused on the areas that will allow the biggest impact to your students. So what then is textbook affordability? Let's take a couple of moments and do something fun. Let's do some more textbook math. There's nothing like that gets the blood pumping in the morning like a brisk discussion of textbook economy. So this first set of numbers shows our students' savings at Stout based on the $53 per book average from NACS. The average number of books per class was compiled by us. The next snapshot shows what the savings look like at the $100 per book figure. And accordingly, our students saved between $477 and $1,180 every year. Now, based on our average price per book that we keep track of here, we know our actual savings put those student savings in the $800 to $900 per year range. But that means that our Stout students are saving over $4 million per year in our textbook affordability program. That's a big number, but have we achieved affordability? Absolutely not. Why? The most memorable conversation I have ever had regarding affordability came with a student several years ago. And he came to my office and he asked if there's any way he could get a refund. I asked him why, and he said, well, I've researched all my books, and this semester, just this semester, I can get my books for $30 cheaper than the fee you're charging me. He said, I was wondering if I could get a refund, not of the whole fee, just of the difference, the $30 difference. He said, I understand why we get charged, what we do, and I support it. It's just this once that I can do better. Now, I was really impressed because seldom do I ever see that type of engagement of students researching their book costs and comparing it to the textbook fees and everything like that. That was really heartwarming to me. We talked a little while longer, and I really made sure and explained that, yes, you may have saved $30, or we may have overcharged you $30 this semester, but we looked back at his record in the semester before, he was assigned 2 access codes, and the description was, but we provided you a lot more content last semester than you actually paid, and the intent is for it to all even out in the end. But I did thank him for his efforts, and I said, what is this why does this $30 mean so much to you? And he said, because I really struggle with finances, and that $30 will buy me food for a week. That's what we have to keep in sight. And when we have conversations as affordability advocates, as administrators, or whatever, about affordability, and we hear things like $50 or $30 or even $20 is a low-cost course, and it's good enough because everybody can afford that. We have to remember that To some, this is still too much of a barrier to success. Now at Stout, we have made textbooks more affordable for our students, but our quest continues. Only when the textbook cost is zero, then we can say we've achieved our goal. But even then, we're going to need to remain watchful for that next event or invention or technology that restarts the clock and makes us have to start looking all over again at ways to support affordability. So that brings me to the last question I wanted to ponder before we go on, and that's who's responsible for textbook affordability? Now, you certainly have heard that academic publishers are responsible for the high cost of textbooks. And I may be maddeningly moderate to some of you, but I would contend that it isn't quite as simple as that. Yes, publishers are responsible for the pricing models that exist today. But I would also contend that blaming a commercial business for trying to make a profit is somewhat akin to blaming a skunk for not showering. Whether we purchase, assign, distribute, author, or in any way contribute to textbooks, we all have a stake in this problem. The important aspect is fixing the problem and not letting it happen again. Therefore, in my view, we all have a responsibility to reverse the trend. How do we do that? We work together. Yes, even with commercial partners. We assure there's a competitive market. Competition in the course content space assures that pricing stays aggressive. Publishers need that aggressiveness in pricing to hold market share. And aggressive pricing usually means lower costs for students. We need to make sure that we're doing the right things. Are we assigning materials that are actually needed to strengthen a course? Are we considering cost and adoptions? Are we assisting students and faculty in making these choices? Are we developing a culture of affordability? We also have to maintain vigilance on the market, and we have to address any disturbing trends. And also, all of us, regardless of our position, are dependent on students for our success. Staying student-centric helps us as much as it helps them. And we do all have a stake in creating and providing alternatives that help students. So how do we do it? We know where we want to go. We want to reduce the cost of curricular content as much as humanly possible. We want to move ever closer to achieving affordability. It's always easier to get to your destination, though, if you have a map. I can't give you a map specific to your institution or situations. Hopefully we can have some conversations after today's events or after the symposium, and we can look at more specific ways that you can address affordability on your campus. I can, however, right now offer you some roads to consider for your map. And remember always the immortal words of Lao Tzu, as he says, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So let's now discuss some of the specific roads on our map to affordability. And the first is inclusive access. Inclusive access, the elephant in the room. What is inclusive access? I want to give you a definition created by Cheryl Casey from the University of Arizona and myself when we did some work with an inclusive access working group for the Open Education Network. And we came up with, it's a content delivery program often managed by campus stores, but sometimes by academic affairs, information technology, or even libraries, that provides students with day one access to digital course materials from publishers and vendors at a reduced cost. It goes by a variety of different names: inclusive access, if you look with McGraw-Hill, Wiley, Pearson, VitalSource, or RedShelf; Macmillan Learning, it's called Follett Access; it's called First Day, Barnes & Noble; Equitable Access, University of California, Davis; and Immediate Access at San Diego State. That's just to name a few. These programs have become quite controversial in the recent past. Advocates claim that they are a real way to save money, and detractors contend that they're not a good approach for students. So let's take a closer look. IA can save students money. Content is available on day one of class. They directly integrate into the learning management system. Students are able to opt out. They don't want to participate. And inclusive access can provide a campus with a quick means to reduce cost for students. But there are certainly downsides too. Students can opt out, but if it's a unique resource not offered elsewhere, it can exclude them from participation. Opt-in and opt-out procedures can also be confusing to students. Inclusive access is digital only, so students may have to find print material elsewhere if they need it, and they certainly can't resell textbooks if they're digital when they're done with them. If campuses partner with only specific publishers, that reduces faculty's academic freedom. IA programs collect a lot of data, so privacy can be a concern. And these programs may provide a means for publishers to resume print textbook pricing practices that have been detrimental to content accessibility in the past. So what is the truth about IA programs, and what should you be prepared to discuss with your stakeholders? First, IA certainly can save money. Our hybrid IA program at Stout has allowed us to effectively stabilize textbook costs, but transparency is the key. Educating students and faculty is essential. Students need to be able to navigate IA material and be able to find alternative resources if they choose to opt out. Faculty need to understand that content choices can result in pricing a student out of course if they can't get alternative materials to products, especially with products like homework platforms. Is IA evil or good business? It really depends on who you ask. I certainly understand the model from a publisher's perspective. IA gives publishers more control of their content. It limits resale. It lowers production costs, and it provides a more acceptable price point to make them really engaged in or be able to market the fact that they're engaged with textbook affordability. This is good business. I do have concerns with some of the agreements that I've seen, though, as being too restrictive. They can limit choice for students and inhibit academic freedom for faculty. Institutions need to carefully structure agreements that look at long-term effects as well as short-term, and constantly provide oversight. Understanding the need, the one really great thing about IA as an affordability measure is that it's very scalable. It provides a fast way to reduce cost. But is IA meant to have a role in your program, or is it intended to be your whole program? More on that later. It's also important to think strategically. For us, IA is certainly one tool in our toolbox, but it's not necessarily the long-term program stability that we're looking for. You always have to be looking at the market, looking at what's best for your students, and preparing yourself so that you can continue to be effective if something else arises. You should be aware of what's happening regarding IA on your campus. Be informed and be part of that conversation. And especially if you're not directly in the procurement process, you should know the alternatives. IA is one tool. For affordability advocates, your role is to educate and to inform not only on the pros and cons of IA programs, but of existing alternatives that are available like OER. What other methods do you have to offer that may be as effective, of greater long-term value? And ultimately, you may not like the decision that's made on your campus regarding the adoption of inclusive access, but in the end, it may be beyond your control. And if so, how will you be positioned to help students make the best of it and to limit its negative impacts? So now I want to discuss a resource that's not necessarily an affordability tool, but certainly is a factor, and that is the use of access codes. Access codes are definitely not, to me, a means to reduce costs for students, but we definitely have to consider them in the affordability process. Codes provide students with access to a number of digital homework platforms that can really augment the learning in particular courses. Positively, These tools offer adaptive opportunities to students to learn and reinforce skills. They can provide quizzes, homework assignments, collaboration tools, and analytics that are meant to support learning. These sites may or may not also include the e-textbook. Sometimes the book is actually an additional cost. They can be very valuable tools for skill development, but conversely, they're expensive. When they're used extensively in a course, it limits the student's ability to opt out. You can't opt out of a product that is required and not available anywhere else. These sites also tend to collect a lot of data, and concerns of privacy issues arise. Personally, I'm neither for nor against the use of access code products. Here, we always encourage our faculty to adopt exactly the tools that they feel are the best fit for their courses. And after they've made those choices, it's our job to go and find how to do that in the most cost-effective way possible. But I wouldn't be truthful with you if I said that they don't have an impact on our program. When we started providing access codes around 2015, about 1,000 access codes per year were in use at UW-Stout. Now that they're included in the textbook fee and used more widely, managed by us, we're now approaching about 10,000 access codes per year. These codes contribute to a significant portion of the fee we charge. They also consume a great deal of our staff time in managing and in assisting faculty and students. So understanding these products and how you can assist in reducing cost and providing help to students is really important. Another new trend for publishers that they're using to address the cost of content are what are called the unlimited plans or all-you-can-eat plans. These programs are often billed as a Netflix approach to textbooks. Do they do this? Is it an effective way to reduce student cost? Yes. I'm going to use Cengage for an example. Their Cengage all-you-can-eat program that they have. I'm not calling them out. I'm just using them as a representative example. So it's for $69.99 a semester. A student can get access to all the Cengage learning platforms. And for $119.99, they can get access to the platforms as well as the ebooks. This would potentially reduce student cost over procuring individual textbooks at retail value for the individual courses. Students would have access to all of the Cengage texts offered digitally. I believe they have about 20,000 titles available right now. But the downsides are we already see that the books and the platforms can be not tied together, and you might have to purchase separate packages. Students have access to the entire list of Cengage titles, but it's been my experience that students rarely go looking for additional textbook access outside of their assigned content. I'm not saying that they won't want to use it for research and other things, but we're looking on true term of return on investment. So it's important to consider. Another consideration would be that in order for this method to be the most effective, all or at least the majority of a student's assigned material would need to be from the same company, or it would mean having to subscribe to multiple such programs or purchasing additional materials, thereby increasing the overall cost that the student has to outlay. And there's still the issue that even $70 may be beyond the student's ability to afford. These all-you-can-eat programs offer a tool to reduce cost, but may need to be augmented by other means to achieve affordability. And kind of the carbon copy of this approach is the next road I'd like to wander down for a little while, and that's textbook purchasing through the library. Libraries already know about supporting patrons. And in recent years, libraries have once again stepped up to help their patrons by providing options for students to get textbooks in hand to limit cost. Approaches vary from placing textbooks on short-term reserve to operating full-blown textbook operations like we do here at Stout. So let's look at the pros and cons of this affordability solution. Libraries understand how to distribute books. They're already a central point in college life. They already support the learning mission. They're dedicated. They have dedicated staff to aid students. They're committed to the welfare of their patrons. They have firsthand knowledge of the institution's curriculum, but there are obstacles too. And the first one, and most important probably, is money. Textbooks are expensive, and library budgets, unless you're different in Missouri, I hope you are, than we are in Wisconsin, our budgets aren't growing. You also may have staff, but you may not have enough staff or space for that matter to commit to full-blown textbook operations. Libraries can also only afford, or possibly only afford, a few copies of texts to be available, to have them on reserve or some such program like that. And that can limit the lending periods for textbooks, meaning a student can't get a textbook in their hand for an entire semester, which can be problematic. And the library may be restricted to the provision of print textbooks only. Now, I know that there are often unlimited user copies of assigned content that can be purchased digitally, but many textbooks, at least digitally, are not available through usual library acquisitions channels. So overall, can libraries offer a viable solution to affordability? Emphatically, yes. It just takes planning. Understand the resources that you have available to commit to textbooks. When you're dedicating staff, be sure that you have subject matter experts in textbooks that can help with student questions. Scope your support to place resources where they're going to have the biggest impact, and always think strategically. Plan for the future and consider the impact and way out of a program if you need to disengage. Another path to follow in our journey may be collaborative purchasing. There is power in numbers, and coming together with other groups, whether they be institutions, consortiums, regional compacts, or something else, provides strong bargaining position. You'll have the numbers to be able to negotiate textbook prices from a position of strength. In return, committing to purchases for more students and making bigger purchases gives publishers rooms to be able to provide you deeper discounts. The biggest obstacles may be find willing collaborators, and sometimes, as with any collaborative, it can also be difficult to get the flock to all fly in the same direction. And what if you're not in a position that you can directly impact the larger policies and procedures of the textbook economy? Well, consider adopting the philosophy of finding affordability wherever it lives. This has been my mantra for the last 11 years. Often there are tools we would love to use to amortize cost, but for one reason or another, we can't because of policy, procedures, lack of resources, or what have you. But don't dwell on it. Take inventory of what you can do to help students. Some seemingly simple approaches that some have adopted over the years have ended up being very impactful. For instance, I challenged my acquisition specialist, my print acquisition specialist, when she makes orders, always pursue free shipping on those orders. And she was really reluctant at first because pushing back against something like that, it's just not what's done. We just don't usually do that. But after some cajoling, she now does that as practice. And since she started just asking for free shipping, over the last decade, she's saved our students tens of thousands of dollars. Some of the other things that have been effective for us are tough negotiation with our vendor partners, being frugal, streamlining processes to save money wherever possible, investing in training and understanding that there are other things that can assist in affordability that don't have a direct relationship to purchasing content. Earlier, I shared with you a version of this slide of services my staff provide to our faculty and students. Everything here is included in our textbook fee. Everything here contributes directly to both big and little a accessibility, provision of curricular content, and directly benefits our stakeholders. And everything here also directly impacts affordability. Yes, you may not be able to engage in collaborative purchasing or have direct influence over the adoption of IA, but I would wager that you can assist in services like these, or you're already doing so. And whatever your role, be it student, librarian, faculty member, technologist, instructional designer, administrator, whatever, you can directly adopt and encourage a culture of affordability on your campus. Knowing the issues facing your students, understanding what is or is not being done about them, talking about them, and doing everything you can in your role to help fosters a student-centric approach to problem solving that paves the way for building a culture that can tackle not only textbook affordability, but a lot of the issues facing our biggest asset, our students. This is a long process that really never ends. And to succeed, it just needs to begin. Following this path a little at a time and step by step, and building community, homelessness, hunger, inequity, and yes, textbook affordability are not economic issues. They're people issues. They affect our community members, our community. And one of the biggest examples of building community to improve the condition of people that I've seen in the recent past is the development of the OER community. Now, many of you listening today are quite familiar with the OER effort. I want you to know that I'm a dedicated OER supporter. I lead our program here at Stout. I believe the effort has truly helped millions of students and saved countless dollars. But my approach today may grate on the most enthusiastic OER advocates attending today. As much as I am an advocate, I'm also a pragmatist. So I want to briefly touch on those attributes that we know make OER great, but I want to concentrate more on the concerns I have for the movement, things that we still need to work on going forward. As I said, there are a lot of great attributes to OER that make it so wonderful. It's free. It can be revised, redistributed, retained, reused, remixed. It promotes academic freedom. It's the gateway to open pedagogy. It provides resources that are tailored to a course, not a course tailored to a resource. It promotes accessibility, and it promotes the opportunity to have resources that look like the students using them. This is truly outstanding. In my world, even a 5 to 10% adoption of OER across the campus can mean a student savings of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. But I do think there are areas that we as a movement need to help each other address to assure that OER remains a potent tool. And the first is, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I emphasize that I think OER is potentially one of the best choices for students for many reasons. My concern is that there tends to be a lot of rhetoric about the evils of some other affordability tools. Inclusive access is one of those tools that's currently receiving a lot of scrutiny, and maybe rightly so. But we need to stay clear-eyed on the positives and the negatives of any choices we make in the search for affordability. Choices that affect the welfare of students need to be carefully studied and weighed for both their immediate impact and the impact in the future. We should never be happy with an approach that does less than achieve our ultimate goal. But as an affordability practitioner, I do need to be open to any tool that can help me provide results in the near term too. We also can't stop talking about cost. The inherent value of OER shows promise of dramatically changing education. But lately, I've seen more of a desire to move the conversation away from the cost savings to those other inherent benefits. And that we need to talk to both. The danger I see of moving away from the conversation about cost is twofold. First, we've spent years branding OER as an affordability tool. And it's going to take a tremendous effort to rebrand open education movement as the future of education. Not that it can't be done, just that we need to think about it purposely. Secondly, the cost narrative is much more easily quantifiable at present. Administrators and legislators are more able to craft support and policy for a clear outcome like reducing or eliminating cost. The potential of open is wide open. Let's just be sure to craft our message so that it speaks not only to us, but to the different groups that have a stake in it too. And briefly, comprehensive planning is imperative. What are your institution's goals for OER? Who's going to see it through? Where do you plan to be 5 years from now? And where will the resources come from to make this all happen? Which also ultimately leads to sustainability. Where do we go when the grant money runs out? We need to intentionally plan for specific, obtainable goals that benefit our institutions. We need to do what the OER community has always done, share and help each other be successful well into the future. OER is a wonderful counter to commercial content, but only as long as we're able to sustain it and keep it a viable alternative. Now, over the last 45 minutes, we've traveled down a lot of different roads that can be used to make a successful map to affordable content. And I'd just like to spend a little time now to help complete that journey and provide you another tool, which is a compass. I've been blessed over the last 11 years in being involved in a program that has been created with the sole purpose of advocating for student textbook affordability. I work with an amazing staff that motivates me every day by their dedication to helping students. I've had the good fortune to meet and collaborate with hundreds of dedicated professionals like yourselves who may see different approaches, but always the same goal, and that's helping our students succeed. So I'd like to take a few minutes and share with you this compass, things that we've used in our work here at Stout that have helped us move towards greater success. And the first group of things is things to use in a day-to-day quest, the operational items. So what can we do? And I'm going to offer these suggestions, not because they're particularly profound or innovative, but because we have had success with them. And they may be familiar to you, but they're certainly worth repeating. The first one being, know the issues. Read, attend webinars, cast your net wide, and don't limit your inputs. It's important to know what's happening with textbooks, but it's equally important to understand, at least broadly, what's the trends in higher ed? What's happening in publishing? What's happening in the commercial world? What are other factors affecting students? Because as the old saying goes, being forewarned is being forearmed. But always be realistic. A wise supervisor once told me, you fight all the battles you know you can win, some of the battles you think you can win, and a few of the battles you know you absolutely can't win. But you have to use your energy and time to its greatest effect. Keep in mind that the most complex problems can be broken down into individual components. And when you start attacking these components, you often find that the problem isn't quite as insurmountable as you first thought. And I've mentioned this a couple of times already, stay campus-centric. National problems aren't always local problems. Concentrate first on what matters most to the people you depend on and who depend on you. And part of the way to do this is tailoring your message. It's much easier to find willing collaboration if you're speaking to your audience's point of view. Administrators and legislators may be moved by dollar amounts and statistics, but that message may not work as well when you're talking to faculty or librarians or bookstore folks. Be sure to consider what your collaborators are looking for from their point of view when you're working jointly. And with that, learn different languages, not Spanish or French or Chinese, but languages like librarianese or facultyese or studentese, or any language that helps you better communicate with your stakeholders. Present your arguments in terms your audiences will understand. Often you're going to find that you're both saying the same thing, just from a different point of view, and it will go a long way towards understanding and cooperation, especially when you're looking for common ground. This can be one of the hardest things to ask of affordability advocates. Be open-minded and find paths to work with your campus store, and yes, even the academic publishers. That campus store depends on your campus for its livelihood, and I'm willing to bet that the success of your students and faculty are also in their best interest too. And as for the publishers, yeah, you know why they're there. They're business and they need to make money, They have to make money so that they can survive in a $25 billion a year industry. But there is middle ground. They want something, you want something. Find a way to come together wherever possible for your students. And evolve. Don't look at your textbook affordability program and say, this is what we are, this is where we're going to stay. Stay current. Look at the trends in curricular content. Game out how you're going to help your students if X happens. And remember that tomorrow is just as important as today. Have an idea of how you can treat affordability in supporting micro-credentialing or artificial intelligence or virtual reality or whatever the next big change brings to curricular content. Publishers aren't concentrating on traditional textbooks for the future. How are you going to be able to adapt as the technology changes? And lastly, and very important, is be involved. You may not win every point in a conversation, but not having a seat at the table almost guarantees you defeat. Make sure you're a voice for your campus, your students, and your faculty. Be active in campus government, task forces, committees. Show your support for the community and introduce yourself to as wide a swath of stakeholders as possible. And don't forget about being involved in organizations like the Open Education Network, SPARC, or even the National Association of College Stores. These organizations add strength of numbers to our voices, and they advocate for all of us. But be not only involved, be actively involved. It's well worth the effort. And the final approach in this compass is I want to offer some insight into 5 truths that I've discovered over my 11-year journey working in textbook affordability. The first is that, and again, we've touched on this briefly, affordability is a national problem, but it's a local crisis. There are a lot of statistics that tell us how bad student debt is across the country. It's helpful to get perspective. But what do things look like on your campus? Creating a program that is targeted first to the highest areas of need provides the quickest impact and allows you to concentrate resources to the greatest effect. But for the sake of argument, let's say you don't have access to a wealth of textbook data. As mentioned before, maybe the data is proprietary or not collected. Where do you start then? Start with what you know. Look at student demographics for your institution and begin to build a picture. For those national averages for textbook cost as your use those national averages for textbook costs as your starting points, and ask the campus stakeholders to work with you. Invite collaboration with the stated purpose of developing approaches to help students. Data is important, but students in need can't wait for a perfect solution. Do what you can, but keep trying. Secondly, affordability needs superheroes. Every institution, every program, every effort needs a driving force. That person who brings passion to the work and they're willing to drive the program forward even when everyone else wants to move on to something else. To any administrators we have listening today, let me just say, someone needs to drive the train. Look for a combination of innovation and enthusiasm, as well as business ability to drive the program. Keep in mind that textbook affordability isn't about creating a bargain. It's about recruitment, retention, and equity. Affordability is an investment in the success of your students and your institution. And advocates, be informed, be active, and be persistent. You're the fuel that drives this train. And when you're looking for long-term solutions, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I'm really leery of someone who works with textbooks and textbook affordability every day of one-size-fits-all solutions. Take advantage of the solutions that provide quick results, but don't stop there. We need to be flexible. We need to innovate. We need to use every tool at our disposal. We need to plan, assess, and reinvent. And we need to look for a sustainable approach to this issue, because I guarantee that technology, methods, pedagogy are all going to change, and our methods need to change with them. Also, you need to be prepared for a marathon and not a sprint. I love this quote. People forget how fast you did a job, but they remember how well you did it. We can apply quick solutions to give that immediate help, but hopefully that won't be the ultimate goal. I've been told repeatedly that our program is admired by other institutions. And after having said that, it's usually followed by the statement, is it exportable? I don't think we could do that here. You've been doing this for so long. I just don't think we could manage it. Of course it's exportable if you're willing to put in the time. We've been a textbook rental school at UW-Stout for over 100 years. But in the last 10, we've totally had to reinvent ourselves as the advent of digital has come forward. We didn't do this overnight. Is it reasonable to believe that others can? Unless, of course, you're committed to commit an extraordinary amount of resources to do it. And finally, the only wrong approach to textbook affordability is doing nothing. I would challenge you to use this simple little test. Ask yourself, do you have students with financial need? Do you have homeless students on your campus? Do you have a food bank? Do you have students that are dropping or failing classes because they can't afford materials? If you answer yes to any of these, you need a textbook affordability program. Start small, include a wide range of stakeholders, use multiple approaches, and plan to sustain and change. Every journey begins the same way, with that first step. So, in conclusion, many of you may be thinking, I'm disappointed. I really thought this guy was going to give us more ideas on how to directly approach textbook affordability. And boy, he spent a lot of time on soft skills, didn't he? But there's a reason for that. I know this firsthand. And that's because that textbook affordability is a mindset. It's about creating a culture. It's about persistence. It's about flexibility and innovation. Mostly, it's about the willingness to adopt a holistic approach that implements immediate measures that lighten the load today, but commits to thinking strategically and making changes that provide results well into the future. It has been my absolute honor to be able to speak with you today. I very much appreciate your hospitality, attention, and your passion for helping our students. Thank you very much. And Tracy, I'd be willing to answer any questions that the audience may have.
Well, thank you, Bob. That was great. Yes, if you have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll start going through some of these. It looks like there's already some coming in.
Super.
Okay, so the first question, what LMS is on your campus, and do you utilize a POS to check out your textbooks?
First question first is, yes, we do have a POS system. It is, I did put my contact information up there. If anybody wants to contact me and have a broader discussion later on, please don't hesitate. We have kind of a homegrown one that's tied directly into our student system. So textbook adoptions are hooked up right with class schedules and all that kind of jazz, but it is homegrown. And we're currently looking for the next iteration of that. Our LMS at UW-Stout is Canvas, and we do a lot of direct integration in Canvas to support our textbook programs, especially in the digital areas.
All right, and it looks like there's some follow-up questions on that. So you spoke about textbook rental. So those books are checked out $13.50 per credit hour. Is the fee charged at registration? And
Correct.
Can you tell us more about how you manage the return of those textbooks?
Certainly. We own all of our inventory outright. We physically purchase all of the books that we distribute in print. When I first started here in 2011, we were 100% print rental. Now we're about 75% digital, only about 25% assigned is currently print. We have a quasi-library approach. We check the books out to the students for the length of a semester. If a student, if we don't have a copy, we make sure and order one for a student. We'll email them directly to let them know when the book is in. And that's whether that's in the first week of courses, or if it's, I know this may be hard to believe, but sometimes students don't come until finals week to get a textbook. But whenever that need arises, we're there to help them. And after the 10th day of classes, then we open our entire inventory of all the textbooks that we have. We have about, I would say about 2,500 titles, maybe 3,000 titles currently in stock. And students are able to check any of those textbooks out in support of their studies. And that's how we manage. Now, here at Stout, the faculty member chooses which format is adopted for their class, whether it's digital or print. And then how we approach that aspect is, if a faculty member has assigned digital and the student wants print, we keep copies of all of our digital adoptions in stock here, and the student just needs to come and check out a print copy. And the reverse, if they have prints assigned, and we're seeing this a lot more lately, our students are becoming quite acclimated to digital since we've been using it since about 2012. And now we're seeing a lot more students coming to us and saying, print is assigned in this course, I really don't want that. Can you help me get access to a digital book? And if that's possible, we do that. So hopefully I answered that question in my rambling there.
And another question is, how do you handle opt-out?
Opt-out is handled through our Student Businesses Services office. We have transitioned all money and all those kind of administrative processes out, so students coordinate directly through the regular appeal process that they would use for any of the segregated fees that we charge for any of the things that that they pay for at UW-Stout. Our opt-out rate is it's really about 0%, just because this is a student program. We coordinate directly with the student, and I make sure that when I talk with them, they understand that I work for them. And when they speak, we listen and comply as best we can. And because of that, they're very, very supportive of the program. We have done everything that we possibly can in bringing even access codes and things under the fee, so that it's very economical for students to stay enrolled. And we really work to make sure that when we find pain points, that we're addressing those and making sure that we're working with our biggest asset, which is the students.
Great. I'm curious, with COVID and everything, a lot of things going more online that maybe hadn't been online previously, did you notice any changes? Was there more faculty really wanting to start working on OER, or maybe looking at more inclusive access books?
So just in totally being honest and open, prior to COVID, we were already probably 65% digital. So we saw a lot less pain in the sudden rush to digital that I'm sure a lot of campuses had to go through. And I certainly sympathize with you. This has been a long process. It's taken almost 10 years for us to get to 65%. This is a voluntary program, and faculty have to opt into the digital portion. And that 65% was reached all with faculty just deciding to adopt digital. We did see an uptick in COVID. We saw a 10, to somewhere between 10 and 15% jump. And mostly that was because, as many of you, we came to work one day and the next day we were sending students home in a big hurry. We heard a lot of, I had a print book assigned and it's in my dorm room and I can't go back to get it. And for us, because we had the infrastructure already set up, in most cases, it was just an option of turning on the digital version of the book. We're directly integrated into the learning management system. Our main textbook provider is Red Shelf right now for straight ebooks, but we also directly integrate others like McGraw-Hill Connect and things like that, so that student access is as easy as possible. When we developed our digital program, we made every effort to make sure that it was as easy for faculty and students as possible, and that we had people ready to walk them through any pain points. So in that aspect, it was a lot less stressful for us than it was a lot of places. Where it got a little more difficult was the number of books that we had already distributed, getting those back. We had to issue some prepaid labels and encourage students to mail them back to us and things of that nature. And ironically, we had the best return rate I think I've ever seen in a semester since I've been here. It's a lot worse when the students are here on campus for some reason. So yeah, that's kind of how we approach that.
Great. Another question we had come in: what happens when a student does not return a textbook at the end of the semester? Do you track it with a serial barcode?
Yes, we absolutely do. So we try to do everything we can to put the student in the good light. What we always tell them is, we don't want your money, we want our books back so that somebody else can use them, so that we can keep the cost of the program as low as possible. So we start out by sending out 4 reminders starting a month before the end of the term. We send a second reminder, a 5th reminder after the due date. And then they have a little grace period because we physically mail textbooks. I know that sounds archaic, and it is, and I'm sure the students hate it as much as we do, but we do mail some textbooks, and it usually takes about a week to 10 days after the end of the semester for them to get them in the mail and get them back to us. So we give everybody that grace period of that 10 extra days. And then we go one step further, and then after 10 days, we will fine the students. We fine them $10 a book for anything that's late. And then we give them the last warning and saying, if these aren't returned within 30 days, then you're going to be responsible for full replacement. And hopefully by then they've reacted and they've returned the books, or they've worked with us. We really are liberal in our return policies, and if there's damage to books and things, and we try to find a way to err on the side of the student. It's in the vein of being a student program. It's in the vein of being an affordability program, of not adding fees to them unless they absolutely put us in a position where we have to. And then after that 30 days from the end of the term, if the books haven't been returned, then we go ahead and we assign a small processing fee, and then we also charge them for the replacement of the book. But I would like to think that we are a little more forward thinking, and how we determine that replacement cost is we look at fair market value on Amazon Marketplace, and we charge the student what it would cost us to replace it, not what it would cost to replace a new textbook. Always trying to look out for the student and making sure that we're doing the right things by them. And we have good luck. Yeah, there are textbooks that don't come back every semester, but it's a pretty small percentage overall.
Great. Our next question: how do you respond if students indicate a preference for print or some types of instructional resources? Does this ever happen? And a follow-up comment was thinking here about inclusive access programs.
Okay, yes. So what we do is being 75% digital, we still keep a print footprint of all of those titles assigned in digital. So every time that we adopt a digital book, we buy 2 print copies to have on hand for circulation. And we also have a third on hand because in addition to everything else, my office is also responsible for providing textbook accommodations. We assist disability services with that. And we keep 1 pristine copy in case we should have to scan that book for use in a reader or something like that. And then the student merely comes to us and says, I'm in English 102. I have this book assigned in digital. I struggle to read. I have too much screen time, whatever the reason may be, we don't care. And they say, I would prefer a print book, and we put one in their hands. And if we don't have one in stock, we will make sure and order that. A lot of times we will even order it on Amazon, ship it directly to them, just tell them that they need to return it when it's done. This is their program, so making sure that they can learn is very, very important to us. Also, too, I would say too is if you're getting into the numbers where you're adopting a lot of digital and you have a centralized textbook area like us, we put a lot of reliance on our publisher and vendor partnerships where we say, hey, we spend a lot of money with you in a year, give us 3 copies that we can have on hand so that while we're adopting digital and you're getting revenue for that every semester, we still have print copies on hand that we can turn around and use to those few students that struggle with digital or have some reason that they want a print book. And we have pretty good success with that. We are providing almost 100% sell-through for them. And we're buying those books semester on semester. And I think it's just a good return on their investment to support us that way. So I would just say, if you're looking at a comprehensive textbook program, use all of those things to your advantage, anything you can to help amortize cost.
Great. Okay, next question. Your program is an EA program at a flat rate per credit hour. Were you at one point an IA program, variable rate based on the cost of the item?
No, we have never been an IA program. We use IA content, but we centrally purchase that content. So it's the campus purchasing from our IA vendors, not the students. And I would say that by definition, we are an equitable access program, but I would say in true honesty, we're not, because we did that long before equitable access was ever coined as a term. I know that I've talked a lot with the folks from UCal Davis and things like that. We have done some iteration of an EA program since we began piloting in about 2012. So that's kind of how I would describe that. I'm not getting my back up, not putting on airs there. It's just that, yeah, those are relatively new terms, and we've never really even thought of ourselves in that aspect. We're a student program.
Great. I'm not seeing any more questions. All right, well, you may get to finish early today, Bob.
I wore everybody out.
Yeah. No, that was so great. Thank you so much. My hand is sore from taking notes, actually.
Well, and I would just, Tracy, at first I'd like to say thank you again for having me. This has been great. I really enjoyed it. And to let you all know, you're welcome, Tim Anderson. I can't get away from the Minnesota State people no matter where I go, apparently. Kudos to them. They're doing a great job over there. But please don't make this the end of the conversation. Let's keep talking. Let's find ways that we can help each other and make sure that we're continuing to help students. That's really the important part. So thank you very much, Tracy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and the thank yous are also rolling into the chat now too. So I want to let you all know that once we end this session, you'll be able to provide feedback on this session. It'll pop up in your window. And also we're going to send an overall conference survey after Friday's session ends. Our next session today is at 2 o'clock. So you get a nice lunch break. And then we're going to be talking about working along the Z degree path. So definitely come back and join us at 2. And Bob, I again greatly appreciate it. And I love the ideas of keeping this conversation going. I know it's, Open Ed Week this week, but I mean, really for you and a lot of us, Open Ed Week is every week. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's keep it going. Thank you all for attending. Thanks again, Bob. That was so great.
Thank you very much. You all have a wonderful week, and I'm headed back to the theater to wrap up that next project. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.